Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP, in association with Savage Unfiltered Podcast, thelibertybeacon.com, and I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the show, loosely titled Red Pill Strategy. The corresponding thelibertybeacon.com piece will be fully titled Some Still Reachable to Red Pill, but One Must Be Strategic About It. And this is quasi sort of part of a series, though next week and the week after will technically be Brain Dead Folks, though the TLB piece will be called Can Lead Leftists to Facts but Cannot Make Them Think, Part 1 and Part 2. The three of these together, these 3 weeks in a row, are a quasi sort of related series, though I didn't want to call it all a part 1, part 2, and part 3. A little bit of behind the scenes there into my thought process, all relating to things I've spoken about in the past, like this article for this week at TLB, and this show is adapted from my Before's News piece by the same names, Some Still Reachable to Red Pill, but One Must Be Strategic About It, from copyrighted Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. And next week's part 1 and part 2, quasi-related, are an extension of a Red State piece from August of 2009. I felt it important and time to revisit these things, to make them part of the ChristiTutionalist Politics show, and also to deliver the remarks and article items to my TLB reader audience. First, if you are not familiar with the term controlled opposition, whether directly or indirectly controlled, perhaps you should educate yourself on the concept before spewing conspiracy theory and being useful idiots for the left in aiding and abetting their discredit campaign of actual conspiracy-related factual items. There are some actual real conspiracies going on. That's why those RICO laws exist, to charge people who conspire to do things, as well as other things that are not outright conspiracies, people getting together like the Austin Powers film, right? Dr. Evil and his evil volcano lair and his cohorts all getting in to the volcano lair to put together their evil plans. Some people are just independently, separately evil, have similar thoughts, don't necessarily have to conspire. They all act on their own accord to the same tune, march to the same drummer, so to speak, more or less. They're not needing to conspire. They all have the same concept of and desire for power and control. So they act in similar or at times exact fashion without needing to engage in an actual conspiracy to do so. So, red pill strategy is about having sensible, strategic arguments, things that are happening to bring in the brain dead folks, which will be the next two shows title, Brain Dead Folks 1 and 2, and the TLB-related pieces can lead leftists to facts but cannot make them think, part 1 and part 2, that these things are happening, and controlled opposition, there are indeed some conspiracy nuttiness items, things that are indeed untrue, other things that are indeed actually true, but just so far beyond the pale and acceptance, and you'll hear more about that next week, like the stages of grief: shock, denial, anger, and acceptance. Some people will never, ever bring themselves to accept some of these things are factual and therefore strategically dumb on our part if we are to attempt to peddle those to brain dead folks, people who aren't paying attention, people who are living the delusional mainstream media bubble. They're just never going to accept it. They're going to roll their eyes at you, walk away, and consider you a loon and a nut. And again, yes, controlled opposition sometimes puts out conspiracy nuttiness that indeed is not true, so that those of us who talk about things that are indeed fact, conspiracy reality, not just theory or indeed some things that aren't outright conspiracy, as I said, just like-minded people acting in similar or concerted fashion, working together to bring about things that give them power and control. But some of that nuttiness that isn't reality is out there so that they can label things that are real as conspiracy theory to try to discredit those of us who are dealing in that reality. But this show is about strategy, what is strategically smart versus what may indeed be true. But people aren't ever going to listen to you if you try to peddle it. You do not open someone's red pill experience with Pizzagate. They're just not going to listen to you. They're not going to be willing to look at your evidence. They don't care because it is just so far out there. They will never, ever want to allow themselves to believe it, versus other things like the Hunter Biden laptop, factual, proving Biden crime family corruption, that they want people to believe was conspiracy theory and all made up so they could win the 2020 election, in part, of course, aside from all the fraud, which again, many will label conspiracy theory and therefore not something you open with to the average person, because again, they're just going to roll their eyes and walk away because they watch CNN and the MSNBCs on TV who poo-poo it all and call anyone who deliver actual evidence of fraud, like the Dinesh D'Souza 2,000 Mules movie documentary, which I call 2,000 Mules and One Whale, referring to Stacey Abrams, regarding violations of election law. It's not arguable. Facts are there. Evidence is there. And whether or not a court allows the evidence in because they're liberal activist courts refusing to deal with the fraud, because then the answer to that would need be throw out some election results. No judge wants to do that or ever go there, which is why the SCOTUS, even the Texas v. Battleground States case, was dismissed improperly on standing, even though the SCOTUS is the only court in the land that could hear Texas v. Battleground States. Texas can't sue the other states in their own state court. There's a conflict of interest there. That's one of the reasons SCOTUS is there, to hear these cross-state battle arguments. But they knew the evidence existed of, indeed, violations of election law, and therefore knew what the ruling would have to be and didn't want any part of it. So they just refused to hear the case so that the evidence couldn't be brought. And again, factual evidence, easily to see for anyone who wants to look at the facts and the evidence and deal in reality versus fantasy. But again, this show is about things that are indeed real, that you can actually get someone to believe, versus things they're just going to continue to roll their eyes and walk away from you on. Things like the Hunter Biden laptop trying to be discredited as conspiracy theory, but someone's in prison for the corruption outlined on the Hunter Biden laptop, but the media won't tell you about his confirming the Biden laptop information, or also dismissing and ignoring the other co-conspirator, Tony Bobulinski, who's gone on record and stating the things on the laptop are true. You can even see the video of Joe in the Ukraine admitting to the quid pro quo on camera. I will not give you U.S. taxpayer money if you do not fire the guy investigating Hunter and Burisma, because that's inconvenient. It can't come out, or the corruption, the Biden crime family corruption, quid pro quos, and money laundering will be laid bare for all to see, and that Biden has been about, still is, about providing favors to those who launder money into their pockets. But getting people to believe that is a far lesser step and cry than trying to convince someone of Pizzagate. You're just never going to get anywhere with that. So this show is not about fact or fiction, but what facts you can actually evidence enough to get someone who is in denial to accept, to believe, to start their red pill journey, to then potentially lead them down those other deeper, far darker rabbit holes that they aren't going to want to deal with. But you've got to start somewhere to red pilling them. And again, this show, Red Pill Strategy, is about being smart, being strategic. You don't go to a child and hand them War and Peace. You start with the Dr. Seuss books. You start with the nursery rhymes, things that they can handle, to then bring them along to the other later books, to educate them on things, to teach them things that they can handle better at a later age or a latter point in their mental development. I will go into next week about It's Like Mourning, the stages of grief. shock, denial, anger, acceptance. A lot of things will be shocking to them. They will then just deny them. They will never get to the anger and acceptance phases because it's just so far-fetched, and preferring their delusional bubble makes their life easier. I'm going to dig now into some notes because that's actually only page 1 of the Liberty Beacon piece that I initially read the first. If you're not familiar with controlled opposition, I'm now 15 minutes in, and that's just page 1, which brings me to the point. The Liberty Beacon piece and this corresponding, correlating ChristiTutionalist politics show, like all the other ones, are meant to complement each other. All I say here will not be in the articles. All I say in the articles will not necessarily be incorporated as part of the TTP shows. But I do want to read a portion of a post of a response to President-elect Jethro at Houday on Gab, where I mentioned Biden laptop cuz Tony Bobulinski testimony, babbling Biden's own on-video admission of the quid pro quo, as I mentioned here, and I responded to someone regarding red pill strategy on Gab. And the Charlottesville lie can easily show Trump on video his whole remarks and clearly not praising Nazis, said several times, I'm not talking about the KKK or Nazis in that discussion, in that post-Department of Transportation meeting discussion where he addressed Charlottesville that the left lies about, which is a large part of what started Brandon Strzok. It looks like Straka, it's pronounced Strzok, who started the walk away from Democrats movement on his fuller and complete red pill journey. A friend of his said, here's a video, Trump's full remarks. I don't expect you to believe anything I tell you versus the spin you're seeing on the television. Please, I beg you, review this video of his full remarks in context as he said them versus the out of context distortion lies the media is telling you. And thankfully, he actually opened the video and reviewed it. He thought he was going to mock and make fun of his friend, who he would have then gone back at and said, you're the one engaging in spin. But his eyes were opened when he saw the full and complete remarks that Trump made. That is a red pill strategy item that if you can get them to just see Trump's full remarks, may start their red pill journey. Whereas Pizzagate, I'm sorry. Yes, there is evidence and facts behind it, but it is just so filthy, so dirty, to the point that people never, ever want to even remotely consider that is reality, that they're going to walk away if you talk about it. So something like the Biden laptop or the Charlottesville lie are far more strategic items that you can evidence to begin them on their red pill journey. The other, the injecting bleach false narratives, right? Have you seen Trump's full context remarks on videos about that? Clearly talking about new technologies, not IT kind of technology. I'm a former IT guy, but medical technology, the use of lasers or infrared light tech into use of the veins in the bloodstream as good or better than old-fashioned mechanical blood scrubbers that the left lies about and says he wants people to inject bleach. These are easy, short, real simple ways to educate and red pill somebody as to the enemedia, as I call them, hashtag ENEMEDIA that I coined, enemedia, liars, spinsters, propagandists, distorting what Trump said out of context, and people's unwillingness to do any research for themselves. And that's the point here. They're not going to do the research. What can you present them that is short enough and potentially they might actually, a liberal like a Brandon Strzok or a Candace Owens versus a leftist, snowflake, woke-tard, complete socialist ideological nut who is different, as Dennis Prager points out in it, part of his PragerU videos. There is a difference between a classical liberal who, like a Strzok or an Owens, you can still present short, factual things to awaken them from their woke stupor and delusional mainstream media bubble, things that can pierce their armor versus those other things, the deeper rabbit holes that you save for later because they're just going to roll their eyes. These simple things, and yes, I go on to say other things you list. I just didn't want to push the video too long. Today's Twitter attention span level. People will get my point, good or not. No worry, not worth further wasting my or our time on with, as some classical liberals like Strzok or Owens can still be reached. Those are the people we need to reach out to. But a full-blown delusional, ideological, committed leftist never will be reached. So I wanted to share in this episode that response to someone on Gab. I mentioned a couple times now, there will be embedded video in the TLB piece of Dennis Prager, Liberalism versus Leftism, a 13-minute, 25-second video. So please check out the corresponding TLB piece and listen to Dennis Prager in his own words on those distinctions and differentiations. I've improperly said, and in fact, in the article, you'll see a meme I created, an image that I share that says, you can lead a liberal to the facts, but you can't make them think. I'd been improperly using the word liberal there when I should have been using all along, and now correct myself and use the word leftist there, because words have meaning. TLB, I've got the twisting and warping of language part 1 and part 2, where I went into this about the left constantly twisting and warping of language. So we, you and I, have to be more careful in our verbiage, the words we choose, the words we use, the proper terminology at the right time. And I'll wrap it up with reading from my notes. Bottom line is, and you would have grasped this if you've seen the videos here in the article, that you are a complete moron. Yeah, I'm sorry, but you are a complete moron if when a person comes up and asks, Why should I leave the Fascocrats party? And yes, the tinyurl.com/fascocrats. That again is not something to lead with, because they're not going to believe what is factually true. There are 28 planks of the National Socialist Deutschland Arbeiter Party in the modern DNC platform. The Nazis got a lot of their stuff from Wilson, Democrat president, and Margaret Sanger, Democrat founder, desiring to murder blacks, of Planned Parenthood. So those are all facts. But again, most people just aren't going to accept it. Even if you present the facts, you won't see the facts. They won't look at your facts. They just aren't going to believe it. But back to my note. I certainly don't, as I know it will just draw eye rolls despite easily referenced facts thereof on those fascocrats' points, but only if when they are well into a red pill process. The point of this being strategic. You have to open and bring people along with the easier stuff, not jump to the, oh, look at me, look what I know. I know all this shit. You're dumb. You don't know anything. You don't know anything about X, Y, and Z. They don't know. They don't want to know. You got to lead with A, B, and C before you get to elemental P, let alone X, Y, and Z related items. If your first thought is to discuss Pizzagate or Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, or whatever the hell they're calling it this week, even though you could go to the World Economic Forum and see their plans laid out right there online for yourself, they're going to ignore you and ignore that. And I will briefly pause right here. I know what some reactions to me are now going to be. And I say to you, stop right there. If your next reaction is going to be to call me names, me, an ally of you, rather than focus on our common enemies and things that we can indeed red pill realistically, liberals, not leftists, liberals like Strzok and Owens, to start their red pill journey, because I did not say that information about Pizzagate or Agenda 21 you may want to impart to them regarding those two topics is likely wrong. They are real and evidenced. I am just saying the point of this whole show. I am just saying you are strategically as brain dead, not being logical, not using reasoning, lacking any understanding of strategic escalation process moves type loon. Think chess. And I know, bad metaphor, bad analogy. Do you lead with your king? Again, now that's not how chess works, but you should get the point. You lead with the pawns and you set up bigger, more grandiose moves, revelations, if you will, as you get further into the game. Maybe I should have left. I should have led, was the word I was groping for there. Maybe I should have led with the chess analogy, but I hope those of you, now that you've heard it, didn't get it to this point, that light bulb goes on. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care. God bless. Again, the next 2 weeks are quasi sort of follow-ups to this, but I didn't want to call them a part 1, 2, and 3 full related series, because it indeed is, while relating, based on a different older article that I am dealing with. They just all quasi relate in some respects, and just so happening to drop in the weeks subsequent to this. Thank you. Take care. God bless. Welcome to the broadcast. Author of the forthcoming book, Trust Shattered, Cases of Government Betrayal, Peter A, and I'm going to spell the last name, S-E-R-E-F-I-N-E Jr. My dad was a junior. They didn't want to make me a third. But please tell us the proper pronunciation, because people seeing it spelled out S-E-R-E-F-I-N-E could probably go a couple directions on the pronunciation. What is the proper pronunciation?
It's Serefine.
Okay, exactly. You could go Serafin, Serafine. Exactly. So I'm touchy, and in those regards, I want people obviously to know the proper spelling regardless of the pronunciation, so they can find you via DuckDuckGo and Jibberoo and FreeSpoke and all those places. The proper spelling is often more important necessarily than the pronunciation, but I've got one of those kind of last names also. It looks French, it looks like Leonard, but it's actually Polish somehow. And it's Leonard without an O. So I try to be sensitive about those things. What is your historical heritage lineage background?
Well, Serafino was my great-grandfather's first name. And when he came to the United States and went through Ellis Island in the 19-teens, and they took the big great book and they turned it around and said, sign here, he put Serafino Ferranti. And they turned the book back around and read it and said, welcome to the United States, Frank Serafine. And
Yep. Yeah, I have, for some reason, on my dad's side, the heritage records just aren't really good and clear going back far enough for me to find like that historic record of whomever was the first on that side of the family to come from Poland. I also have Italian and German heritage. Also, those sides of the family, I'm able to find all kinds of records on. But my dad's side, for some reason, it's like pulling teeth. It's like digging for gold, for treasure. It's like you might find a rare nugget here and there, but not what I really was hoping to find.
Well, it was my dad's side of the family, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't still have the name. But the history of it was not well documented in the family. But however, on my dad's side of the family, both my paternal grandmother and my paternal grandfather came from Italy as children. And they actually came from two little towns, let's say 5 miles apart, like two little tiny towns in Italy, really close together. Came here as children, met and married and all that here in the United States. I forgot where I was going with it. The interesting part of it, my eldest son recently did one of those DNA tests, the 23andMe or something like that. And okay, well, both of my paternal grandparents came from Italy, so you would think I'd be half Italian, right? Yeah, well, his DNA test came back and said he was only like 5% Italian or something. So, migration happens. It's very possible that many people along the family tree, though married and wed and had kids and all that stuff in Italy, didn't come from Italy.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Ed Bondarenka, and I host Your American Heritage on Saturdays at 2 in the afternoon on this station. Your American Heritage is a show about the struggle we find ourselves in and how to react to it in the light of our biblical and American heritage. Listen to it while you're working around the house, the garage, cleaning the guns, walking the dog, driving, or just lazing around. Join me at 2 o'clock Saturdays here on Wham Radio, 1600 AM, 92.7 FM.
God bless America.
Yep. It is interesting the things we can find, the assumptions we have,
Mhm.
because unfortunately, in America, I mean, a lot of the people who come to America, or at least in the past, came here to become American, not be what they were where they came from, and they don't really pass down a lot of the culture. Like growing up, they went out of their way to make sure they didn't speak Polish and German and Italian, whereas I certainly wish they would have. It would have been nice to have been around and know those languages,
Right.
just for my own broader educational well-being and abilities to converse indeed with other cultures. But before we go any further, let me say this about you. U.S. Navy veteran, devoted U.S. mail carrier, rain nor sleet nor all that stuff, right? Yeah. Certified instructor for the Institute on the Constitution, a Patriot Academy constitutional coach, near and dear to my heart. Epitomizes the spirit of service, having served both his country and his community with unwavering dedication. Let's your community. You were a Pennsylvania State Constable, I understand.
I am a
Oh,
Pennsylvania State.
not were, am. Okay.
Pennsylvania is a little weird in the existence of the constable. So we have police forces and we have sheriffs and we have a state police force, just like any other state. But Pennsylvania has this thing called a constable. And a constable is elected or appointed by town. So by municipality. Each municipality can elect or appoint a constable.
Like a sheriff. Like
kind of like a sheriff, except for instead of county-wide jurisdiction, the constable has statewide jurisdiction. So the last election that went by, my town did not elect a constable. The gentleman who got the most votes wasn't eligible, and they don't go to the next person in line. It's you won, but you don't get it. See you bye, and they don't go down the list. So when I saw that, I did a little research as to what a constable does or is required to do in Pennsylvania. And the one thing that they are absolutely required to do is maintain peace at the polling stations on election day. So we didn't elect one, and I thought, elections are getting pretty ugly. That seems like a pretty important job. So the next thing I did was to look into how to get appointed to the job. So I got myself appointed. The president judge of the county swore me in, and I am the Pennsylvania State Constable for my little borough. The only thing I really do with it is the required duty of maintaining peace at the polling stations. I could work for the courts and process warrants and, arrest warrants and serve papers and all that kind of nonsense, but I already have a full-time job, so I don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, election security, a major concern. Pennsylvania, I remember full well seeing in Pennsylvania a Black Panther with a billy club intimidating voters, trying to turn away voters at a polling location, obviously clearly in violation of law, trying to shape the election. He wasn't there to protect the poll. He was there to try to turn vote away that he knew the majority at that precinct wouldn't kind of go his way. Right. So yeah, I'm glad you do that. That is very important. Now, here in Michigan, speaking of elections, that last election cycle, Ralph Rebant ran for governor in the primary. He didn't get the nomination. Tudor Dixon did, but he used Lighthouse as his campaign logo. I also write for thelibertybeacon.com, and before it's news, they both also use the lighthouse, shining a light of truth, symbology. Tell us your association with and the creation of Liberty Lighthouse?
Well, Liberty Lighthouse is kind of my brand. I I consider it the beacon of common sense cutting through the fog of politics. That's the tagline. So I started paying any attention, getting involved in politics, about 2015-ish is when I started paying any attention at all. And I went, "Man, this is getting a little crazy." So eventually, I'd say 2018, I started to write my first book, Progress, really. Uh, and it's just my view of social and political progress in the United States, things that I personally witnessed. I'm reaching around. I know I have a copy of it around here someplace. Um, yeah, so Progress, really one man's view of social progress in America. So that was my very first book. It's less than 100 pages, a little itty bitty tiny book. If you sit down, you can read it in like an hour, hour and a half tops, the whole thing.
Hey, that's great. Something small, concise, precise, to the point, less expensive that way, so more people can get it in their hands, as opposed to writing something War and Peace size that will,
I've got that around here someplace.
yeah, that'll cost what, like $50 nowadays, that people can't afford $50 for a book these days.
Yeah. So Progress really was the first thing, not only the first thing I ever wrote to be published, but the first thing, my first foray into the world of politics. After I wrote this book, all of my friends and family started saying, "You should do a podcast. You've got a great voice, and nobody really reads blogs anymore. You should do a podcast." So eventually, I started a podcast, and I called it Liberty Lighthouse. And then, after a year or so of hosting Liberty Lighthouse and having some pretty amazing guests on my show, I wrote a second book. It's so simple, even a politician can understand. Simple ideas for seemingly complex issues, political issues. This is a collection of a dozen or so ideas. Again, pretty short book, a little longer than the first one, but still pretty short. A collection of ideas that either I had while hosting Liberty Lighthouse, the radio show, or ideas that came to me through my guests. And it's nonpartisan, I guess is the best way to put it. It talks about, like, why is the government, forced philanthropy is one of the chapters in it. Why is the government taking our taxes and then donating it to nonprofit organizations, charities? Well, if I wanted to give money to a charity, I would give money to that charity. Why is the government doing that? The government really shouldn't be funding nonprofit organizations. That's for we the people to do ourselves.
You are preaching to the choir here, of course, on ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast, as indeed over and over I say that render unto Caesar does not apply there. It is not the government's job to take and redistribute that. Charity is our personal commandment and our duty to engage in and give to or volunteer for. So that is way up the line of what this show is often indeed about. So let's talk about trust-shattered cases of government betrayal. And since you were promoting or showing and demonstrating for those who catch my video version on my YouTube and Rumble channel behind the scenes, whereas the show is normally an audio podcast, will have seen how small those other books are. First question then needs to be, how many pages is Trust Shattered Cases of Government Betrayal?
Well, I don't have a paper copy to hold up and show you. I actually haven't had it printed yet. It doesn't come out until May. And right now I'm recording the audiobook, and I do it myself. And I that is my final step of my own personal editing process, because I will catch more mistakes while recording the audiobook than anything else. So, but right now it stands right around 200 pages. So it's still a short book, a little longer than the first two, but still pretty short. It's not a terribly detailed book. This is not some think tank production. It's not a an intellectual read where you have to go through pages and pages and pages of footnotes or anything like that. This is all everything in it is already very well documented.
30,000-foot view of
Right. That's a great way to look at it. It's a 30,000-foot view. It's about, it's 48 chapters. Each chapter will take you 3 or 4 minutes to read. They're really, really short. But each chapter is one instance of how our federal government, or there's a couple of them there that aren't federal. We'll say our government. Each chapter is an instance of how our government has violated our life, liberty, or property. They've somehow betrayed their trust of protecting our life, liberty, and property, and actually become the instrument of violating the life, liberty, and property of the citizens all by themselves.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear you instinctively know what I try teaching others along many lines in my How to Write a Book and Get It Published, hints, tips, and techniques. What you said is exactly right. Read your own book aloud, whether you're recording it for the audio book version or not, or have Microsoft Word through your computer read it back to you, if nothing else, because yes, hearing it read, hearing it spoken aloud indeed can catch a lot of, well, you know what? That doesn't sound quite right. That should be reworded, or it still won't necessarily catch, which is why I say everyone should still go through a master's degree, classically trained Oxford editor to catch things. Like in my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book, it accidentally, whole and whole. The
HOLE versus WHOLE.
Yeah, that W makes all the difference in the world as to the meaning we're talking about. The whole picture or the rabbit hole view, right? So, yes, glad to hear you're doing that as you work towards your final touches. Do you have a guesstimate about how many pages it's going to be at this point?
Yeah, it's going to be about 200, maybe 210 at the most.
Okay. Yeah, that's still, again, keeping the size down in this day and age so that the cost can stay down is an important thing.
Oh, that not only that, but quite frankly, I don't like to read very much. So I write books for people like me. I use short books with short chapters and short paragraphs within those chapters. Like I said, this is not some intellectual academic work. This is, let me glance at the table of contents here. So the book is divided into 3 parts: betrayed bodies, betrayed liberties, and betrayed estates, life, liberty, and property. And within the within the parts are the chapters, and each chapter looks at one instance of how our government violated our lives, liberty, property. So in part 1, there's a chapter on the compulsory sterilization of the early 1900s, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, the Guatemalan syphilis experiments, the polio vaccine, the human radiological experiments, Project 112, Project Shed, San Francisco biological warfare test, the Operation Sea Spray, Agent Orange testing, MK Ultra, Project Sunshine, Project Big Buzz, Plum Island Animal Disease Center, Operation White Coat, the nutritional guidelines and the food pyramid, FDA revocations, and COVID-19.
Well, of course, since you mentioned chapters, most are at least tacitly aware of the Tuskegee situation.
Right.
Other things you rattle off, some may not, so that's good. Are there any other from other parts of the book, chapter-wise, that you think might surprise people, or that surprises you? Seemingly people know nothing about this. That's why it has to be in my book.
Well, one of those things is, I've known about it, but not everybody does, is civil asset forfeiture. Civil asset, wow. speaking is a problem today, apparently. Civil asset forfeiture is where a law enforcement person, your sheriff, your local cop, whatever, can just take your property because they think maybe possibly you may have gotten it illegally, or it may be ill-gotten gains in some way. No trial, no jury, no proof of any of that. And they're just, you're driving along and you've got, let's say, $10,000 cash in your car for whatever reason. Reason doesn't matter. It's your cash. You can do with what you want. Maybe you're going to buy a house and that's your down payment. Maybe you're going to give it to your kid as a wedding gift and you don't want to write him a check. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It's your money. And you get pulled over because your tail light's out and the cop sees the cash and says, well, normal people don't have $10,000 cash.
Suspected.
I'm going to take it.
Yeah, suspected drug money.
Yeah.
Right. Blanket excuse. And as you say, and it is pure Constitution violation of your due process
Absolutely.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the government has incentivized this behavior because let's say, your local sheriff says, hey, let's take this cash. They turn it over to the DEA. The DEA rewards that sheriff with a portion of that money.
It becomes
now you've got to go through federal court to get your money back.
Yep. It becomes another avenue illegally outside of the 16th Amendment of taxation in a sense, so that they can pad their budgets with this ill-gotten gain.
Right.
Their ill-gotten gain, not yours. You likely had it legally.
Right. And it doesn't matter. Even if you are a drug lord and you're taking illegal money around town, if they can't prove it, they can't take it.
Exactly.
Those are the rights of this country. You can't take stuff without a warrant that was presented and signed by a judge that was sworn to under oath or affirmation. They can't just take your stuff. But it happens all the time. It's called civil asset forfeiture. Look it up.
I have spoken on it, written on it many times. Indeed, a lot of people don't know. I only know friend of a friend who indeed had that happen. And sometimes an honest mistake, this is off of that topic, that people might call an overreach or abuse, like the whole defund the police things. They're all paranoid, shoot happy, no, that's not the way it is. There are a few rogue bad apples here and there, but there are bad apples in virtually any whatever you're talking about. But I had indeed a friend. I was at a Ram's Horn restaurant. Telegraph Road is 4 lanes on one side, a medium 4 lanes on the other, a highway, not a freeway. And all of a sudden, swarm of 6 cop cars are pulling over this beat up old Chevy Cavalier, which again, I know the guy, and out with their weapons drawn, get out of the car, get out of the car, show us your hands, get out, it's like he wasn't speeding, no tail light out, no nothing, but you've got to understand, you don't know the why they think they need to do that. And it turns out his car and his likeness to a degree matched a bolo for an armed bank robbery. So, yeah, they swarmed him. And yeah, they thought he was armed. So, and after it all, rather than getting all upset about it, he shook their hands and said, thank you. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, well, that's a little different. Those police officers had a reasonable expectation. Like they had a car description, they had a man description, and this person, apparently fit both of them. But, back to civil asset forfeitures, there was a case of a P.O. box company. It wasn't a post office, but it was one of those places where you could rent a P.O. box. And, well, the people running the place were They were doing some shady stuff. They were, I don't know, maybe they were laundering money. I don't know. The people running the company were doing bad things. And when the FBI got involved, they showed up and they didn't take the corporate assets of the company who's suspected of wrongdoing. They took the contents of all the P.O. boxes, safety deposit boxes. I said P.O. boxes. They took the contents of all the safety deposit boxes. All of those people had their valuables, their personal effects, whatever, in these safety deposit boxes without any proof that any of them did anything wrong.
Right. Not even a warrant to search them.
No, nothing.
Because they suspect there is illegal items hidden in these boxes. Right. It has gone way, way, way out of control. Let's talk about your trustshattered.com site, because I know you've heard from me. You mentioned someone else also told you that, lo and behold, the Google Chromium, which is the base of almost every browser nowadays, Firefox and Brave and all those other ones you think aren't Google controlled are using Google Chromium now as a base. I've discussed that on another show. So there's a site warning coming up about your site. Has that been resolved yet? And let me assure you I've been there. There's nothing harmful about trustshattered.com, and some browsers will let you, go to site anyway. Others will just say, no option. You can't go there.
Right. You're right. Not only you, but one other person did tell me that they were getting a safety warning before they were allowed to go to the site. I posted that on social media, and I said, and look, somebody has decided that my site is unsafe. It's a, phishing site or something like that. And it's not, I promise. And one of the first comments we made was, yep, you're right. I got the warning too, but I went anyway.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM is your conservative flamethrower. Weekdays, Steve Gruber starts things off at 6 a.m. Gruber gives his perspective on the issues of the day. At 9 a.m., Glenn Beck blazes the airwaves with his nationally syndicated program. From noon to 3, it's Dennis Prager. At 3 o'clock, it's Wham's own Thayrone X. On the Edge, Thayrone tells it exactly as he sees it. At 6, it's The Dana Show, your conservative alternative. At 8, don't miss Joe Pags. Weekends are filled with conservative talk as well. Fingers Malloy, Thomas LeDuc, The Abolitionists Roundtable, A Moment of Clarity with Pastor Rick, Your American Heritage with Ed Bondarenka, Dave Janda's Operation Freedom, and Dick Kupke's Trigger Talk. You can even get links to Wham podcasts from Dave, Dick, and of course Thayrone, all from their pages on our website, whamradio.com. Keep it locked on Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM in southeastern Michigan, and whamradio.com anywhere in the world.
In a way, it's kind of good it happened. I had a situation with Google censorship regarding an article I wrote on the Forge News because of this exact thing. Chrome throwing up these seemingly arbitrary and not fully vetted warnings. So, yeah, I made PR value out of that, obviously. Censoring me again. It can entice people to then want to visit trustshattered.com to see what the hullabaloo is about.
Well, what I've done is, I've contacted Google, and there's a way that you could report that a site is being wrongfully labeled. So I did that. And then on my own platform, like I went into the back end of the website, and I tried to make sure that there was no contradictory contact information. One of the things I noticed is I had my personal email information as a contact in one place, and then my Liberty Lighthouse email address as a contact someplace else. So I tried to eliminate all of those so that there was no way that it could think that That's a bait and switch. This guy is telling you to go here, but when you click the contact button, you go to this guy. I tried to eliminate all that stuff I could find on the back end myself. And then I contacted Google, but I don't get the warning because I built the website. So
Right.
I'm going to have to rely on you people out there of taking a look and telling me that it is or is not fixed.
Since you mentioned email, let's go there next. What is your Liberty Lighthouse email that people can reach out to you via?
The email address I prefer is that the Liberty Lighthouse. It's Liberty Lighthouse 1776 at gmail.com.
Which, of course, another way Google gets to play with you because you're using Gmail.
Right.
I use Yahoo generally, but my Leonard at terrorstrikes.info, indeed, that website, that email is Google system controlled. So
Yeah, most of them are. I thought about getting like a Proton Mail or something like that, but I look at it and like, really, let's be honest, if they want it, they're going to get it. So I don't think I'm high enough or big enough. I don't have a big enough following or anything like that. I don't think they're really messing with me. Maybe they are. I don't know. But if you go to trustshattered.com, this is something I just came up with. I thought it was pretty exciting. Go to trustshattered.com. And of course, you can pre-order the book. And I would love for you to do that. You can also enter to win a book. I'm going to make it basically, I'm going to give you a 10% chance. If I get 100 people that say at the enter, I'm going to give out 10 books. So you got a 1 in 10 chance of winning a free signed copy of Trust Shattered. But you don't want to risk it. And you hit the pre-order button and you pre-order a physical copy, whether paperback or hardcover, either one. I'll sign it. And I've got about 20 copies of the U.S. Constitution that are indexed copies where you go to the back and it says, you want to look something up and it says impeachment. And you go, oh, well, that's Article 1, Section 2, class. It's an index copy of the Constitution. It's really quite handy. I've got about 20 copies of that. So for the first 20 people that pre-order the book, I'm going to throw that in with it.
Oh, that bonus.
Wait, there's more.
Yeah, exactly. Like the late night infomercials. Well, wait, there's more. And we've talked now, you said May is when it officially drops.
Yep, May 1st.
Pre-sale through your site is available now, yes?
Yes.
Pre-sales at Amazon or other, is there a date for that?
Well, you can, if you want an ebook, a Kindle or a Nook those you can pre-order now through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you get them. Amazon won't allow pre-sale of hard copies. I don't know why. I've tried it before. They just don't do it. Maybe because I'm not a big enough name, whatever. I don't have the right. I can't do pre-sale there. So I'm just basically collecting. I made a PayPal button. You click it and it takes your address and gives me the money. And then I'll mail them out myself. Like I'll sign them and mail them out. I'm probably going to do all of the hard copy pre-sales that way. The audiobook pre-sale, as soon as I get done recording, I'll put it up and you'll be able to pre-order it wherever you like as well. But hard copies, whether it's hardcover or paperback, physical copies of the book. The only way to pre-order it is at trustshattered.com.
Yeah, and pre-promotion, like you being here doing today, is potentially more important than having the pre-sale option on a book that people might not navigate into on their own.
Right.
To see that it's pre-sale option available or not. So the you've affected my mouth now. Now I can't talk. But yeah, the pre-promotion is important. And again, the drop official sale date is May what? Or
May 1st.
May 1st. Okay, there we go.
So my goal, my plan, my hope is anybody who pre-orders a physical copy, I'm going to put it in the mail a couple of days before May 1st, and you should have it in your hands on May 1st, maybe even a day or two early.
I did that with my book. My book officially dropped my first international book, Terror Strikes, Coming Soon to a City Near You, dropped April 15, 2023. Well, it's a book on terrorism, dropped on April 15 because that's two things. As a Christian, that's was Good Friday that day, plus the implication of the terrorism of our
The
own
IRS.
society, of the IRS. Exactly. You know, for those who think, you could see the implication,
I saw that coming.
multiple of that date. Yes, exactly.
Well, I've done my previous books. I released them on Independence Day and on Constitution Day, and I thought about doing this one on Constitution Day, and then I thought, well, that's awful close to election, and this is going to be a big election, and I don't think anybody is going to be able to get any attention at all if they're talking about anything other than the election. So I decided to launch it a little earlier, and maybe we can get it out before the election, because this is, I think it's important stuff. It's if you pay any attention to government at all, if you're critical of government, you're going to know most, if not all, of the stories in this book. Hopefully, my hope is that there's one or two that you'd never heard of, and you went, "Oh, I didn't know about that one." But I also tried to write it in such a way that you could hand it to your most progressive, liberal, uh, whatever, the most progressive liberal person that you can find. The most government needs to control everything. They're the only ones that can do it. You should be able to hand it to them, and they'll read it and go, "Wait a minute, what? The government did all of these things?"
Yep.
My hope is after anybody reads part one of this book, Betrayed Bodies, and they read part one and they think, oh my God, why would anybody ever allow government to be involved in healthcare at all, let alone run it? That's
and yet everybody knows they are on video and audio themselves saying they're not deep fake stuff. Obama and crew saying Obamacare is a stepping stone, likely to fail. They don't care if it fails because it's a stepping stone to what they say Medicare for all. I say Medicaid for all, because it's more like the Medicaid system than the Medicare system. And again, that's right out of the National Socialist Deutschland Arbeiter Party's platform. Socialized medicine, because it's not about health, it's about power and control and the ability to use coercion. Peter, we'd love to help your daughter with those cancer meds, but we need you to do this for us. We need, it's about power, control, and coercion, not health. And you and I both on the same page regarding concern for the election and getting out ahead. My ChristiTutionalist Politics 2 book is slated for June of this year, the same thing, to be out enough before to hopefully help influence some people that don't know the things that are in the book. And of course, if you think you know everything that's in Trust Shattered, Cases of Government Betrayal, buy a copy for somebody else as a gift.
Even if you do know them all, like this, what I thought, the reason I wrote it is, I knew almost all the stories in there. There's not very many of them I had to look up much of, but I never found a place where anybody put them all together. I never saw a spot where somebody said, hey, look, here's all of the things that the government has done to betray our health. And then, hey, here's a whole list of things that the government has done attacking our personal liberty. Oh, by the way, the first chapter in that one, in Betrayed Liberties, part 2, is the Alien and Sedition Acts, passed 7 years after the Bill of Rights. The people in Congress that passed the Alien and Sedition Acts, a whole bunch of them also passed the Bill of Rights. How quickly they turned, how quickly our government just ignored the concept of freedom of speech and made criticizing government illegal 7 years after the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, I was just in an argument the other day as co-host of Savage and Filtered. We were talking to somebody who wants to put forth a convoluted, way unnecessarily overcomplicated new amendment to try to restore the 10th Amendment rights rather than,
How about just reread it?
how about repealing the 17th, which kind of put the nails in the coffin of the 10th? But no, it's more about him and his name than it is about what is feasible. A one-sentence repeal of the 17th is far more likely to be entertained by the states than his 10-page new weird, let's not do it the way we used to, still a whole new way now, but similar to the past to restore. No, overcomplicating and convoluted is not what we need.
That's not what I do either. Like I said, I don't really care. I don't like to read a whole lot. To be honest, I'll tell you the story of that. How does a guy who doesn't like to read end up writing 4 books? I was probably 25 before some eye doctor realized that I probably should have had bifocals my whole life. I got glasses. I was that one kid that showed up the first day of kindergarten and already had glasses. So I've had glasses my entire life. I was like 25 before anybody realized I probably should have had bifocals because I didn't know any better. I'd start reading and 15 minutes later, my eyes were dry and itchy and, I got a little bit of a headache. I just thought that was normal. So when anybody said, I love to read, my thought was, you're freaking crazy. But anyway, so I never developed that big love of reading. So that's why I write the way I do, short, easy to digest things. I also have, I do a weekly op-ed article that I post on Substack, libertylighthouse.substack.com. They're all 3-4 minute reads too. Like, I don't write anything terribly long. I don't want to fluff things up. If you want, like using the chapter at the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, like that you mentioned earlier. Yeah, we all know it existed. I give like a 30,000 foot overview of what it was and when it happened and all that kind of stuff. You want to learn more? Go Tuskegee syphilis experiments and search it in your favorite search engine. You'll find all the information you ever need.
Yeah, I'm with you again. We're on the same page. Despite I've been writing my whole life, only 3 books are currently internationally available. I'd rather see the movie type. So that comes up a lot indeed when I'm doing interviews for my various books. Yeah, I'm more put it on the big screen for me instead than much of a reader myself, though. Yes, I do have a bookshelf in the room over with an original of Pierre Boulez's Planet of the Apes and
well,
Rand stuff and all that, obviously, but
I'm sitting in my personal library. My wife and I, there's 2 of us, and we have a 4-bedroom house. So we turned this one particular bedroom into my studio/library. She collects Stephen King books, hard copies only. I collect classic literature. So I have, 2 bookshelves, one on either side of me that you obviously can't see. But, I'm looking over and there's Les Mis, Victor Hugo. There's The Sun Also Rises. There's Sherlock Holmes' entire works. There's To Kill a Mockingbird, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Jane Austen, the Arabian Nights, and just trying to think of the ones I can actually read while I'm, and of course the George Orwell entire collection.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I lost my train of thought where I was going to go. Indeed, a lot of these things that you mentioned, like To Kill a Mockingbird, and I forget the other one. That's like, Les Mis, love the play. No interest in reading the book. But I obviously shouldn't be saying those things.
Let's just put it this way. It's a lot of words.
Yeah. Now, I shouldn't say those things on my show, let alone anybody else's show, because I want you to buy the books.
French literature And some of my favorite stories are French. I mean, like I love pretty much anything written by Alexander Dumas, but Victor Hugo, Les Mis, that's as big as War and Peace. I mean, it's a huge book. So yeah, in that particular instance, I agree. Watch the play.
My ex-wife was a big Stephen King fan. I never really got into him. Yeah, I saw the movie version of Christine and Carrie and a few others, but I've never really been a huge King fan. My love is more generally science fiction in many regards. I've written some science fiction stories. They've not been widely distributed or published. So H.G. Wells is obviously in my collection. I love his stuff. But my favorite movie of all time is The 13th Floor, because it's a very multiple kind of cross-genre, sci-fi, thriller, drama, romance, a bit of comedy, all rolled into one. It came out in 1999. It was a Matrix film before the Matrix trilogy, which is now a quadology, with Keanu came out. And to me, that movie, based on the book Simulacron 3 that I do have in my library, is far more a potential reality than the Matrix films, because today's VR and SimCity, you could literally put yourself into your city, and the Sims don't know they're artificial, and you interact with them. So the 13th Floor to me, and Simulacron 3 came out in the 60s. Again, yet another book by another author well ahead of his time.
I was just going to say, if you like science fiction, Jules Verne.
Oh,
again, another French, but
yeah.
but I'm telling you, the French authors of the time were incredibly verbose. Any version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that you've ever seen in any bookstore anywhere is highly abbreviated. The original book is huge. And when they translate it to English, they're like, no, we could leave out this whole section right there. Just leave that right out. But yeah, the French authors, they're incredibly, but one of the things I loved most about it was, the descriptions of architecture in Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like there's a lot of talk about the architecture in the beginning of that book. And in Jules Verne, I love the detail of, going into the genus and the species and the family of, every creature they come across. And most people just goes right over their head.
Yeah.
But I liked it. I liked that detail. Moby Dick, another huge book. I loved, being a former sailor, I loved the detail of where the rope went around the sailors in the little whaler boats and how it went through out a pad eye at the front. And, I thought that was really interesting and neat. But most people were probably just completely bored. Like, why are you telling me where this rope runs?
Yeah. Well, then versus today, with what I call the twatter attention span, right? Give it to me in a 5-second soundbite, but as two of my shows, Gray Areas 1 and Gray Areas Part 2, attest to, not everything is black and white. You need a detailed discussion about that gambit of between black and white. And, and a lot of people sadly just aren't willing to do research or go in depth in anything. They, when's the next game on TV? I don't have time to, actually learn things that affect my life, whether my sports team wins or not. That's great. That's wonderful. Pride for the community. And obviously some economic benefit if they're doing well around their stadium and that. But at the end of the day, so many other things that far more critical in affecting your life, they've got no interest in spending an hour. But a game, 2.5 hours of escapism, they're all for.
And the latest TikTok dance is not going to affect your life one way or another. That's true. But again, that goes back to like what I write in my my op-ed articles. I consider myself a constitutional originalist, and I write short articles. They publish every Wednesday morning. That I look at whatever issue I look at. I try to keep it short and simple, and say, this is what the Constitution says about the topic. For example, the recent Supreme Court thing with Texas, where the barbed wire or razor wire, where the Supreme Court says, nope, the federal government has the right to cut the razor wire that you put up in Texas.
Well, as of right now, as
Yeah,
we're speaking and recording, they actually
I know they-
intervened in an injunction. That's not a full court hearing and ruling of a case entirely yet. That's still yet to come, and who knows where it will indeed go under the Chief Just Ass, as I call him, Roberts Court.
But to me, I talked about it, how historically, well, first off, the Constitution doesn't say anything about immigration. It says naturalization. Congress has the authority to set the rules for naturalization. Naturalization is the process of becoming a citizen. It has nothing to do with crossing the border. And the only mention of that would probably be in the idea of invasion, which it falls under. Yes, it's the federal government jobs to help prevent invasions, but also gives the states the right to do that too.
That's part and parcel. Of course, the Second Amendment is about our own personal protections too, but state militias to
Right.
defend one's own state, which, people, you say militia and it's like, oh my God, right? We're back to
We don't need militias anymore. Militias were replaced by the National Guard. No, the National Guard is something completely different. But yeah, I tried to join a militia here. I live in Pennsylvania, and the largest militia in Pennsylvania is called the Pennsylvania Lightfoot Militia, and they're very well organized, and there's a lot of them. I looked at what it takes to join, and I looked at the equipment list of stuff that you're expected to buy yourself, and I went, holy crap, I can afford all that stuff.
And with that, we'll close it out and remind everyone, trustshatter.com. If you get a warning, it's perfectly safe. I've navigated around the site. No issues, no problems, no bait and switch, as you alluded to, or any of that stuff. Just yet another book that is convenient to and for the fascocrats, as I call them, which are forever growing government. And you alluded kind of to the founders. People don't understand. The Federalists, of course, were asking for somewhat limited, but a stronger federal government than the Articles of Confederation. We're not talking about the Confederate Slave States Constitution, the original Articles of Confederation that we formed under to begin with. The Federalists wanted a stronger federal government. And the Federalists went on to found the Federalist Party, which then later morphed into Democrats that I call fascocrats. They have always, from the get-go, been about more power for themselves, right? We're talking Wilson and FDR and LBJ as descendants really out of the Federalist system.
Well, going all the way back again, I talked about the Alien and Sedition Acts. John Adams was a Federalist, and the Federalists controlled all of government in 1797, 1798. They're the ones that passed the Alien and Sedition Acts and made it illegal to criticize your government, which made them lose the next election. And then Jefferson became the president, who was a Democratic Republican, who repealed the ones that he could and let the other ones expire. So, the power swing has always been there. One party gets power, they do all the things that they want to do, and then piss off enough of we the people that they go, no, that's enough of that crap. Let's try this other side. We need people that read the Constitution. And actually, that's the prologue to my book is the John Jay quote. good at quotes, so I'm going to call this a paraphrase because I'll probably get it wrong. That it's the duty of every citizen, or the citizen of every state, to read and study its constitution so that it will better know, better perceive when its rights are being violated.
But today's fascist federalists don't want anyone informed. That's why there's no such thing as civics pretty much in the schools anymore. Or history now is social studies, and Howard Zinn rewriting of history, George Orwell 1984 style, to deal with cultural concerns rather than the actual history. We are doomed to repeat stupidly if we don't actually study the real history. Well, with that, thank you for coming on, Peter. I greatly appreciate it. Again, the book drops in May, trustshattered.com. Give us the Liberty Beacon site again. Lighthouse.
Liberty-lighthouse.com. Liberty-lighthouse.com.
Yeah, I knew there was a hyphen in there, so I wanted to make, because I get that with thelibertybeacon.com. There is a libertybeacon.com, completely separate and different site. I don't write for them. And you got to be careful, or people get confused, go to the wrong place, and seeing something entirely different than what they were looking for in many cases, as people try to piggyback off of clickbait, bait and switch you to them.
Yep.
All right. Have a great day. Take care, and God bless.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for having tuned into ChristiTutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via terrorstrikes.info/shop. And you can obviously learn more about the very non-traditional or fluffy style Christian book, but a Christian book nonetheless. Also, please tune in to Savage Unfiltered Podcast, of which I am a co-host, and be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. In addition to seeing the corresponding thelibertybeacon.com piece referenced in any episode of ChristiTutionalist Podcast, see to the show transcript on podcast platforms that provide access to it, like Buzzsprout at tinyurl.com/ChristiTutionalist for additional bonus material there in the transcript. Thank you. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast and Savage Unfiltered. Maybe even go back a few years and dig up some old The Patriot angles. Share episodes. We need your help to grow the show.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.